Imagine walking into your workplace one day and realizing it has completely transformed overnight. The empty seats are gone. The silence replaced by chaos. The quiet routine you once knew, now drowned in the deafening roar of over 18,000 screaming fans. Every move you make is watched. Every mistake is replayed. Every moment judged in real time. Welcome to the new reality of the Indiana Fever. Because the moment Caitlin Clark stepped onto that court, everything changed. This wasn't just a rookie arrival. This wasn't just hype. This was a complete takeover. Chartered flights, sold-out arenas in every city, security escorts, cameras waiting outside hotels, and a media storm that never ever stops. What used to be a rebuilding team hidden in the shadows has now become the center of the entire sports world. But here's the part nobody is ready to talk about. While the spotlight is locked on number 22, while the world debates every shot, every foul, every headline, there's a completely different story unfolding behind the scenes. A story about pressure, about sacrifice, about what it really feels like to stand next to a generational superstar while the entire world is watching. And this time, that story is finally coming out, because what you're seeing on the surface is not the full story. The headlines will tell you one thing. The analysts will scream another. And social media has already made up its mind. But none of them are actually living it. None of them are inside that locker room. None of them feel that pressure every single night. And none of them truly understand what the Caitlin Clark effect is doing to the players standing right beside her. See, while the world is obsessed with the rise of a superstar, there's a completely different reality unfolding behind closed doors. A reality filled with expectations, tension, and moments that cameras don't always catch. And for the first time, someone from inside that system has decided to speak on it. Not with headlines, not with hot takes, but with the truth. And that truth is coming directly from someone who lives it every single day. Lexie Hull, not a media personality, not a former player looking for attention, but a key piece inside the system, someone who has been there before the spotlight and survived after it arrived. On Sophie Cunningham's Show Me Something podcast, Hull didn't hold back. She didn't give you cliches. She didn't repeat the safe, polished answers people expect. Instead, she gave a rare glimpse into what it actually feels like to be part of this new era of the Indiana Fever. And maybe the most surprising part of all, she made one thing very clear. She's not running from it. She's not overwhelmed. She's not looking for a way out. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Lexie Hull wants to stay. She wants to be right there alongside Caitlin Clark in the middle of all this chaos. And that decision alone tells you everything you need to know. Because if this situation was as toxic, as divided as the outside world keeps claiming, why would anyone choose to stay in it? That's where the Real story begins. To really understand why this matters, you have to go back to what this team used to be. Because before all the noise, before the cameras, before the sold-out arenas, the Indiana Fever were invisible. For years, they were stuck in one of the toughest rebuilds in the league. Losses piled up, confidence was tested, and outside of small, loyal fan base, almost nobody was watching. This wasn't a team playing on national television every week. This wasn't a team dominating headlines. This was a team grinding in the shadows. And right in the middle of that grind was Lexie Hull. Drafted 6th overall out of Stanford, she came in with expectations, discipline, and a championship mindset. But the reality of the league hit fast. The wins didn't come easy. The attention didn't come at all. And the transition from college dominance to professional survival was anything but smooth. Night after night, this roster fought for respect. Not fame, not headlines, just respect. Then slowly, things started to shift. The arrival of Aaliyah Boston brought stability inside. A presence, a foundation. But even that wasn't enough to shake the league. Not yet. Because what came next wasn't just another draft pick. It was a moment that would completely change the direction of the franchise forever. And then it happened. The moment that flipped everything upside down. Caitlin Clark arrived. And just like that, nothing in the league looked the same again. The Indiana Fever went from a developing rebuild to the most watched team in American sports overnight. Sold-out arenas, national television coverage, road games turning into events, and a level of attention this franchise had never experienced before. Every possession started to matter differently. Every shot amplified, every foul debated, every mistake replayed across the entire internet within minutes. But the most important change wasn't just outside the arena. It was inside it, because now defenses weren't just playing basketball anymore. They were reacting to gravity. When Clark crosses half court, the entire defense shifts. Two players step up. Rotations get tighter. Space disappears instantly. And that's where everything changes for the rest of the roster. Suddenly, players like Lexie Hull are no longer just role players in the background. They become pressure points. Open looks appear. Transition lanes open up. Corner threes become game-changing opportunities. But only if you can handle the moment. Because being open in theory and delivering under that kind of spotlight are two completely different worlds. And as the season unfolded, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about one superstar. This was about an entire team being forced to evolve in real time, under the brightest spotlight the sport has ever seen. And with that spotlight came something nobody can fully prepare for. Pressure. Not normal pressure. Not playoff pressure. But constant, unfiltered, national-level pressure every single night. Because once Caitlin Clark entered the league, the Indiana Fever stopped being just a basketball team. They became a weekly headline machine. Every game turned into a debate. Every hard foul became a controversy. Every referee decision became a national discussion within minutes. And for the players around her, the experience changed completely. Suddenly, nothing was small anymore. A missed shot wasn't just a miss. A turnover wasn't just a mistake. A defensive rotation wasn't just a play. Everything was amplified. Everything was analyzed. Everything was judged. And that kind of environment doesn't just test skill, it tests mentality. Because when the world is watching your every movement under a microscope, you either break under it or you adapt to it. For players like Lexie Hull, adaptation became survival. She had to embrace roles that don't always show up on highlight reels. Defensive assignments that nobody celebrates. Hustle plays that don't trend online. Corner shots taken in silence, but expected to be made under chaos. And while the outside world focused on the noise, something very different was happening internally. A team was being forced to grow faster than any normal season would ever allow. Not in comfort, but in pressure. And this is where basketball itself started to change. Because what people call hype, coaches call attention. And what fans call excitement, defenders call problems. When Caitlin Clark stepped into the system of the Indiana Fever, she didn't just add scoring. She changed geometry. Defenses stopped guarding possessions the normal way. They started overreacting, overhelping, overcommitting. One step inside the arc, and two defenders are already thinking about rotation. One dribble into the paint, and an entire weak side collapses. That's not just talent. That's gravity. The same kind of force that changes entire systems around players like Stephen Curry and LeBron James. Because when a player forces that much attention, the rest of the court becomes a chain reaction. And that chain reaction is where teammates either disappear or become essential. For someone like Lexie Hull, this is where everything clicked. The corners became her space. The transition lanes became her opportunity. The defensive hustle became her identity. But it wasn't automatic. Early on, defenses dared her to shoot. They packed the paint. They ignored perimeter threats. They tried to break the system by taking away the easiest option. But basketball has a simple rule at the highest level. If you ignore someone long enough, they either punish you or they disappear. Une chose punissement. She started relocating faster, cutting smarter, reading Clark's drives before they happened. And slowly, she became more than just a role player. She became the release valve, the pressure point that turned chaos into structure. And that's when Indiana stopped being predictable and started becoming dangerous. In every breakout story, there's always someone who doesn't get the spotlight at first. And for the Indiana Fever, that person was Lexie Hull. While the world focused on the arrival of Caitlin Clark, Hull was doing something far less glamorous, but far more important. She was adapting, not just to a new system, but to a completely new reality. Because when attention increases, roles don't just grow, they get redefined. And Hull embraced that shift faster than most people expected. Defensively, she became relentless, chasing screens, disrupting passing lanes, taking assignments that most players avoid. Offensively, she became surgical, not flashy, not forced, just efficient. Corner threes, smart relocations, quick decisions under pressure. And slowly, something started to change. Coaches noticed it, teammates felt it, opponents respected it. Because every time defenses collapsed on a Clark, there was Hull ready to make them pay. But what makes her rise even more interesting is what she revealed outside the court. In conversations like the one on Sophie Cunningham's podcast, she didn't describe chaos as something negative. She described it as opportunity. While outsiders assumed pressure would break the group, inside the locker room, it actually built trust. A trust that you don't get in normal seasons. A trust that only forms when every game feels like a national event. And in that environment, Hull didn't fade into the background. She stepped forward, not as the headline, but as the connector, the player who quietly stabilized everything happening around the biggest spotlight in basketball. From the outside, the story was already written that a superstar arrives. A team is divided. Tension builds. Drama follows. That was the narrative being pushed around the Indiana Fever almost instantly after the rise of Caitlin Clark. But inside the locker room, the reality looked very different. Players weren't operating in isolation. They weren't separated by ego or attention. And they weren't living the fractured story being told online. Instead, something quieter was happening. Chemistry was forming under pressure. And voices like Lexie Hull became a key part of that stability. Because while the media focused on controversy, the players focused on survival, on winning possessions, on building trust, on adapting to constant attention without breaking structure. The truth is, when a team suddenly becomes the center of global sports conversation, everything gets exaggerated. A facial expression becomes a headline. A missed rotation becomes a storyline. A substitution becomes a debate. But inside the building, it's still basketball. Still film sessions. Still corrections. Still communication. And over time, something important became obvious. The outside noise was louder than the internal reality. And that gap is where misinformation grows. Because the more people assume division, the more they overlook the simplest truth that professional teams are built on daily collaboration, not viral narratives. And for Hull, that reality mattered. She saw the physical intensity on the court. She saw the media pressure off it. And instead of buying into the noise, she doubled down on the group. Not as a reaction to headlines, but as a response to what she actually lived every day inside the system. As the season settled into history, one question quietly started to define everything that came next. What happens now? Because once you experience that level of attention inside the Indiana Fever, there are only two directions you can go. You either step away from it or you build on it. And for Lexie Hull, the answer became very clear. She wasn't looking for escape. She was looking for continuation. With Caitlin Clark leading a new era of attention, and players like Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell forming the core, Indiana was no longer a rebuilding project. It was becoming a system, a structure built under pressure, a roster shaped by attention, a group tested in real time under the brightest spotlight in basketball. And Hull's decision to stay wasn't just about basketball logic. It was about belief. Belief in the chemistry they built. Belief in the identity they formed. And belief that what they survived together is only the beginning. Because teams like this don't come together often. And when they do, they either collapse under the weight of expectation, or they evolve into something far more dangerous than anyone predicted. The outside world will continue debating the headlines. The media will continue shaping narratives. But inside that locker room, something simpler exists. Trust, work, repetition, and a shared understanding that this story is still being written. And if the early signs are anything to go by, the rest of the league might not be ready for what comes next.